Okay, part 3. A little bit of errata. I said switching transformer in the last video as a power supply. No, that was incorrect. The correct term is a switching power supply. That's usually what you find in a lot of computerized hardware. It's definitely, like I said, something you want to unplug. You want those off, completely separated from a power source when you start using your radio. So an easy way to do that would be to put them on plug bars that you can switch off. Short of that, if you don't have any plug bars, just flip all the breakers off except for the one for the fridge, unless you're unfortunate enough to have one that's computer controlled. And then you just have to put up with it. Okay, the next video. Things to more things to expect. These are also some things I like and dislike about it. We'll start with the likes. Shortwave radio has always been a really cool way to stay in touch with the rest of the world's pulse. Shortwave radio is a good way to get news and events of what's going on in each nation on a very personal basis. What you find, dang, my nose itches. What you find in a lot of the rest of the world is that they listen to shortwave on a regular basis. You know, that's like a common thing. Like here it's AM and FM. You know, we get an AM and an FM radio. In other countries it's AM, FM, shortwave, and long wave in some cases. I got a radio that my friend had that he had got from the UK years ago, and it had long wave, which is actually frequencies below the AM band, very, very low frequencies. Then it had the AM band, which over there is called medium wave. We just call it AM here because it's the de facto standard on that. Then you have shortwave, and then you have FM. They call it FM over there, I think. I think it just goes by the same de facto designation. But this radio had all those bands in it. It didn't have a full shortwave implementation because it was just a basic dial-tuned radio like you'd get off of the shelf at a store, you know. And you'll have to excuse me, I just ate and it's still settling, so please excuse my bad manners. Or I'm trying to avoid having the bad manners, but you know, it's just one of those things. But anyway, they listen to shortwave on a regular basis, so it's a really good way to keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on in other parts of the world. Their news agencies, everything broadcasts on that. The bad thing about it, you have to read between the lines in a lot of that news because a lot of nations have their propaganda machine running, especially the more oppressed nations. You will never hear a bad news report from China about anything, about any conditions there, I found. And in the last 3 or 4 days, and even back 5 or so years ago when I was tuning shortwave, I never heard a bad report about the inhuman conditions that exist in China. They clean and dress up their radio shows, and I imagine if their spokespeople were to say anything about what was actually going on bad over there, they'd probably be hauled out and shot, or they would probably be put in a detention center. A detention center, you know. So, yeah, a lot of nations have a propaganda machine that's running. The Arab nations, Egyptian nation, well, you know, Egypt, China, other places where workers are oppressed, things like that. So you have to take what they say as a half-truth when you hear it. But otherwise, most of your freer countries, they have that. Also, a lot of shortwave broadcasts, they have people that, they have lessons. You can learn to speak their language if you tune in enough. They do lessons. For instance, again, China Radio International, they teach Chinese. I have tuned into France before, and I've heard French lessons. Occasionally I'll find a Spanish speaking channel, Spain or something in South America, and you'll hear Spanish lessons. You know, they do it in a very structured thing, but if you don't tune into it all the time, you don't get all the lessons, so it really doesn't count. So you really have to be in the habit of it. Things I don't like about shortwave. I can tell you right now, I have a better insight into why the Arabs hate us so much, why the Arab nations hate us so much, the ones that are Islamic. One of the first things you're going to find when you scan across the shortwave bands is pretty much 90% now. It didn't used to be this way. We used to have really level, unbiased stations that just did general reporting and general interest. But a lot of those stations have gone away. So what has replaced them is this religious zealot fervor I've never heard before until recently. It was pretty bad 5 years ago, but there were still a lot of stations to balance it out. But it pretty much everything you tune on the shortwave dial, except for like 2 stations, is just religious crap, you know. And if you listen to it, and the way these people go on with their fire and brimstone and hell and this and that and the other, if I was an Islamic person in the third world who depended on shortwave, and this is what I was getting out of America, which is what they are getting out of America, I wouldn't want that way of life in my country. It's very threatening. And the first thing I would think is, this is not the way of life I want over here. These people are insane. So there's that. The other flavor of American shortwave broadcasting, which is occurring now, is doomsday. Doomsday paranoia, conspiracy. Build your bunkers, grow a beard, and can your food for 50 years, you know. Go out into the Midwest and hide your guns under haystacks. The government is coming to enslave us all. Woo! You know, and this is the other thing that's being broadcast. And it makes you not even want to tune American shortwave radio in. Thank God that there are foreign stations that are a bit more level-headed. Another thing that you'll find, especially if you pick up Cuba, you'll be tuning another station. Cuba has been bad about this lately. Radio Havana stomps all over other stations that are designated to transmit on those frequencies at times. I mean, just trounces it. I don't know how much power they're transmitting out there, but it's like they've got all their beam antennas pointed into the U.S., and they are just walking all over everything. And I think it's payback for what we did when, you know, back in the grand old days of the Voice of America, and we were sending them our propaganda. Well, they're sending us theirs, and I mean, it's very statist. They're the traditional old school communists, you know, and they're proud of it, and man, they just blow that stuff in. And that's the other reason you don't want to use earbud headphones or anything that goes in your ear. Always use headphones that sit on top of the ear, because when they switch that transmitter on, it's like, boom, you'll be sitting there listening to some little DX station, all of a sudden, boom, Radio Havana, Cuba, you know, and you're like, ah! So, yeah, just some things. All in all, it's an excellent, excellent hobby. As like I said, if you're not into religion, you're going to find yourself skipping a lot of channels, especially if you're not a religious nut. Now, if you're a paranoid schizophrenic, I guess Prison Planet and InfoWars and all that's your bag. You'll be tuning the American stations all the time. But it's I understand it now. You know, people are always saying, why do they hate us so much? Why do they despise us? Tune across the shortwave band and pick up some American stations. There's one guy, I don't know who he is, he's a nut. He preaches 24 hours a day and plays a song when he gets up to take a dump or when he gets up to eat. Otherwise, he's on there preaching hell and brimstone. So, you know, this is the kind of stuff that's pouring out of our country. The country that was supposed to be religious freedom has the most weird-ass zealots transmitting on the worldwide bands that there ever was, next to some of the Islamofascism which is going on, too. But see, I now have a secondary point of view and I understand it a bit more. And we're on 10 minutes, so this will be the last in the series. Go out and get you a good radio, have some fun, get you a logbook.